The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in February 1983, and the man who answered it was not the man the producers expected. They had been trying to reach Marvin Gaye's people for 3 weeks. The Grammy nominations had just dropped. Sexual healing was everywhere, on every radio, in every cab, drifting out of every bar on Sunset Boulevard. And The Tonight Show wanted him. Not just for a performance. They wanted him to sit across from Johnny Carson and talk. His manager took the call, said he'd check, went to find Marvin, found him in the back room of the house on Gramercy Place, sitting on the edge of a bed that hadn't been made in days, holding a letter in both hands. The envelope was already torn. The paper inside was folded 3 times. "Johnny Carson wants you on the show," the manager said. Marvin didn't look up. "Tell them yes," he said. "I have something to say." Nobody asked what. They would spend the rest of their lives wishing they had. The man who tells this story worked the NBC Burbank soundboard for 19 years. Retired now, he lives in Pasadena with a dog and too many bookshelves. He pours his coffee before he talks and lets it go cold before he drinks it. He said Marvin came in wrong that night, not unprepared, not nervous, wrong in a way that took a few minutes to name, like a man who had already decided something and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. "I had run that show hundreds of times," he said. "I had Sinatra in that chair. I knew what famous looked like. That night was different. Marvin walked in and I thought, that man is carrying something that has nothing to do with music." He picked up his coffee, set it back down without drinking it. The letter that started everything had arrived 2 weeks earlier. It came from a woman in Washington, D.C., written on behalf of her brother. Her brother's name was Marcus. He was at Cedars-Sinai, 4th floor, and his hands weren't steady enough to write himself, so she had written for him. 1 page, careful handwriting. Marcus wanted to see Marvin, just once if that was possible. Marvin and Marcus had grown up 4 blocks from each other in Deanwood, Northeast Washington, before the records, before Motown, before any of it. They were 12 and 13 years old, standing on a corner in the summer of 1952, singing doo-wop into the dark because there was nowhere else to be. Marcus had a higher voice, clean and bright, the kind that carried across the street without effort. Marvin used to say Marcus could hit notes that made the neighborhood dogs sit up straight. Marvin Gaye Sr. caught them once. He came around the corner and saw his son under a streetlight, head tilted back, singing. He didn't shout. That wasn't his way. He simply took Marvin by the arm and walked him inside. But as the door swung shut, Marcus heard him say it. Low and certain, the way a man speaks when he has already decided there's nothing to discuss. "That noise is not from God." Marvin didn't talk about that corner for decades, but the morning after the letter arrived, he told his driver to stay in the car, walked to the street, and hailed a cab. He gave the hospital address. He rode across Los Angeles, watching the city go by without really seeing it. Marcus was on the 4th floor, room 412. He was smaller than Marvin remembered, not shorter, just less of him. Something had been quietly removing itself over the past months. His eyes were closed when Marvin walked in. Marvin sat in the chair beside the bed. The room smelled like antiseptic and old flowers someone had forgotten to throw out. After a while, Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at Marvin the way a person looks when they're deciding whether something in front of them is real. Then he said it. "Do you still remember the corner song? The one we used to sing when your father wasn't looking?" Marvin stayed 2 hours. He held Marcus's hand for most of it. When he finally stood to leave, Marcus had already closed his eyes again. Marvin straightened his jacket, stood there another moment, then walked out. In the elevator, he pressed the lobby button and stood without moving for the full ride down. In the parking lot, he lit a cigarette. His hands were not entirely steady. Somewhere above him, Marcus was still in that room. Across the city, Marvin Gaye Sr. was alive and home, and unreachable and 14 miles away. Marvin took out a small notepad, wrote a number on it, stared at it, put it back in his pocket. He smoked the cigarette down to the filter. Then he took the notepad out again and dialed. His father picked up on the second ring. A game show was playing in the background. Marvin could hear the studio audience laughing at something he couldn't see. "It's me," Marvin said. "I know who it is," his father said. A silence. "I just wanted to call. I wanted to hear your voice." Another silence, longer than the first. You all right? Yes, sir. You need something? No, sir. All right then. 47 seconds. Marvin counted them. He would count them again many times in the weeks that followed. The Tonight Show studio in Burbank ran cold. The engineer kept it that way on purpose. Warm rooms made guests sluggish, and Carson liked people alert. The crew had been briefed. Marvin Gaye, 2 Grammy wins, sexual healing, keep it on the music, everyone goes home happy. But Marvin arrived in the green room and did none of the things guests did. He didn't check his reflection. He didn't ask for water. He sat with his jacket on and his hands on his knees, looking at a point on the carpet that didn't have anything on it. A young production assistant brought him tea. He thanked her. She would tell people about that thank you for years, not because it was effusive, but because it was the most present thing she heard a guest say all season. Carson stopped by before the taping. 15 seconds, handshake, quick read of the room. When he shook Marvin's hand, he paused, just slightly. Looked at him. You doing all right? Not a pleasantry, an actual question. Marvin said, I have something I want to say tonight, if that's okay. Carson studied him for a moment. Then say it, he said and walked out. The first 8 minutes of the interview went exactly as planned. The album, Belgium, the Grammys, the comeback. Marvin was warm and precise. The audience laughed in the right places. The producer in the booth let his shoulders drop. Then they came back from commercial and Carson leaned back in his chair, and his producer said something through the earpiece about the next segment, and Carson quietly removed the earpiece and set it on the desk without looking at it. He looked at Marvin. I want to ask you something personal, he said. Tell me to go to hell if you'd rather not. Marvin said, ask. Sexual healing. That word, healing. What did you need to heal from? The studio went quiet in a way the engineer had never heard in that room. Not the expectant quiet of an audience waiting for a punchline. Something lower than that. He said he felt it in his chest before he understood it in his head. Marvin looked at his hands. Then he looked up. I have a friend, he said. His voice was not the voice he used on stage. Quieter, less shaped. His name is Marcus. We grew up together in Washington, Deanwood. We used to stand on a corner and sing when we were kids. My father thought it was a waste. He thought music pulled you away from the things that mattered. Carson said nothing, waited. Marcus is in a hospital right now. I went to see him last week. First time in more than 20 years. And the first thing he asked me, the very first thing, was whether I still remembered the corner song, the one we used to sing when my father wasn't watching. Hold that moment, because the engineer behind the glass said he looked up from his board right then and watched Johnny Carson's face go completely still. Not composure, not professionalism, just stillness. The face of a man who understood exactly what had been said and was waiting for what came next with the kind of attention you only give to things that happen once. After I left the hospital, I called my father. Marvin pressed his thumb against the inside of his palm. I don't know exactly why. I just wanted to hear his voice. He picked up. I said that. He said, "You all right?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "All right then." Marvin's jaw tightened slightly. 47 seconds. 40 years packed into 47 seconds, and we both talked like that was a perfectly normal thing. Carson said quietly, "Do you think he knows what the music is for?" Marvin considered that the way a person considers something they've been carrying a long time without looking at directly. I think he never asked himself that question, Marvin said, and I think I spent 30 years trying to answer it for him anyway. Every record, every stage. I kept thinking, if I get loud enough, if enough people listen. He almost smiled. He doesn't come to the shows. A woman in the third row was crying, not trying to hide it, just sitting there. Carson lowered his hand below the desk and held the edge of his chair, out of frame. That boy on the corner in Deanwood, Carson said. Is he still in there? He's the only one in there, Marvin said. Everything else is just what I put on when I go outside. Carson never aired it. After the cameras stopped and the studio cleared, he found Marvin in the hallway, held his hand briefly, and said the tape was his if he wanted it destroyed. Marvin shook his head, said keep it, said maybe someday it'll mean something to someone. Carson filed it himself that night, a thing he never did with guest tapes. He wrote something on the label in his own handwriting and put it on a private shelf. What happened later that night is something the people who were there remember in pieces. Marvin played a concert. The first three songs were exactly what the crowd came for. Then he started What's Going On, a song he had sung so many hundreds of times the words had stopped being words. They were just shapes his mouth made. But midway through the first verse, something shifted. Small, almost nothing. His voice didn't break. It moved in a way it hadn't been asked to move, like a door opening in a room that had been sealed a long time. He stopped singing. He set the microphone down on the stage floor. Not a drop, a placement. The sound it made was picked up by the monitors. One flat metallic note, then silence. He turned and walked off. The band played 3 more bars on reflex, then stopped. Backstage, Marvin sat on a road case with his hands on his knees. His keyboardist found him first. Marvin looked up. "I told Carson everything tonight," he said, "about Marcus, about my father, and for a minute I felt it loosen. Then I walked back out there, and it came right back. Because out there I'm supposed to be something, and tonight I don't know what that something is." He was quiet for a moment. "Marcus told me something when we were kids. When the song scares you, that's the exact moment you have to keep singing." He stood, drank a cup of water, then walked back out. He sat at the piano. He didn't explain anything. He didn't pick up the song where he'd left it. He played something quiet in a minor key, a simple melody that moved like the memory of a song rather than the song itself. Nobody in the arena recognized it. It wasn't on any record. It had never been played on any stage before. It was the corner melody, the one Marcus had asked about. 12,000 people stood in the dark and listened to Marvin Gaye play a song he had learned at 13 on a street in Washington, D.C., while his father was inside with the television on. The engineer at the soundboard said he couldn't explain what happened in the next 40 minutes except to say it was the most honest concert he ever ran. Marcus died 6 weeks later. Marvin didn't go to the funeral, said the tour made it impossible. The people around him that week said he was quiet in a different way, not withdrawn, just careful, like a man moving through rooms that might contain something breakable. Marvin Gaye Sr. outlived his son by 19 years. The two of them never found their way to a longer conversation. The 47 seconds in that parking lot remained the closest they came. Carson's tape has never surfaced. Nobody knows exactly where it is now. But the engineer in Pasadena thinks about it sometimes when Sexual Healing comes on the radio. All those people calling it a comeback. All that writing about resurrection and return. He picks up his coffee, doesn't drink it. He wasn't singing about coming back, he says, looking at something past the window. He was singing about what it costs to stay.